Let's look at some of the other principles in this lesson. Absolute value. Absolute value is the distance from that number to 0. Right, the distance from that number to 0. So the way we learn it is always positive, correct? So if it's negative, the sign's going to change. If it's positive, the sign's going to stay the same. But when we get to something like this, pi minus 6, is that value positive or negative? Pi minus 6.
It's supposed to be negative.
What's that?
It's supposed to be negative.
It's negative, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, when I get rid of the absolute values, what do I have to do? I got to change it to positive. How do I change a negative to a positive?
Multiply by negative.
Multiply by a negative. So therefore, the absolute value of this is going to be 6 minus pi. Because now that value is positive, because 6 minus 3 is a positive number, right?
Yeah.
So we have to look at it that way when we are taking absolute values. If I had now E is 2.718. So here, if I had the absolute value of 6 plus E, is that a positive value or a negative value?
Positive.
Positive value. So when I take the absolute value, it's going to stay
The same.
positive. So that's why my answer is 6 plus E. So when they're asking you to take an absolute value, look at what the value is before you get rid of the absolute value bars. To determine, do I need to change the signs or do I need to keep the signs the same? If I need to change the signs, I change all the signs. If I don't need to change the signs, I leave all the signs the same. So it's all or nothing. Don't do anything or change everything. Okay, that's the key when you're dealing with these absolute value problems. Make sense? Yes? Okay, let's look at distance formula. If I'm looking for the distance from A to B, distance formula says absolute value of my second number, my final number minus the first. So here, my distance between A and B would be
That's 6 and 8, right?
8 minus 6,
2.
2, absolute value,
2.
2. If I was going the other way around, distance from B to A, final, 6, minus initial, 8, negative 2, absolute value. Distance is always positive. Distance is always positive. So the absolute value of B minus A is my distance formula. For numbers on a number line. Coordinate graph, if I have coordinates, then I got the distance formula of this. Square root of x squared minus, or x2 minus x1 squared minus y2 minus 1y1 squared. Should be familiar.
Yeah.
Distance formula. Alright? The second time, I don't want to show you how to get that, but it basically deals with the right triangle. The hypotenuse squared equals the sum of the two legs squared. It's basically what we have here. And Monday I can show you that, but I just want you to know that if I have these points, 3, 2, negative 1, 5, then you do some of this in your head. This is the difference in your x's. What's the difference between 3 and negative 1?
Huh?
What's the difference between 3 and negative 1?
2. 4.
4.
4. Sorry.
So I'm going to square it. Oops, this should be a plus, not a minus. I'm sorry. Change that to a plus. What's the difference between my 2 and 5?
Negative 3.
3. Square it.
9.
So we get 16 plus 9, which is
25.
25. Take the square root. 5. So you don't have to show me a whole lot of work here. You have to remember the formula. But you remember, this is the difference of my x's, square it, difference of my y's, square it, add them, take the square root. Look at another one real quick before we look at the midpoint formula. Alright, distance formula. Change in x squared plus the change in y squared. Okay? What's the difference in my x's?
It would be -2 minus 1, right?
Which is
3.
3 squared,
So that's
9. What's the difference in my y's?
8.
8 squared, which is
64.
64. 9 plus 64.
73.
Take the square root, and I can't take the square root of 73, so I just leave it square root of 73. Distance formula. So I'm using this formula here for any time they ask for the distance between two coordinates. Midpoint. If I'm looking for the midpoint between this point and this point, midpoint formula says x1 plus x2 divided by 2. So the difference between when I add 5 and 8, I get 13 divided by 2, which is
6.5.
13 over 2.
Okay.
No decimals, no mixed numbers, leave it in proper fraction.
Yeah.
So if I was looking for the midpoint between these 2 points, I use this formula, but I use it for the x's and the y's. 3 plus -1. 3 plus -1.
2.
2 divided by 2.
1.
There's my x coordinate. 2 plus 5.
7.
7 divided by 2.
7 over 2.
There's my y coordinate. This is the midpoint formula. Right? So if I have x and y, then x1 plus y2, or x2 divided by 2, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. And that will give me my midpoint in between 2 points. Okay? Then lastly, equations of a circle. Looks like this. X minus x1 squared plus y minus y1 squared equals r squared. So if my center is 3, 2, and my radius is 5, I can make my equation of my circle by taking 3 back in, x minus 3 squared, plus put my 2 in, y minus 2 squared equals 5 squared. There's the equation of the circle. I can go backwards and say, what's my center? What's the opposite of these? And the square root of that. Okay? And that's what I'm doing in the equation of the circle. Finding the center, finding the radius, or I have the center and have the radius, and I'm finding the equation. But this is my equation, x minus x1 squared plus y minus y1 squared equals r squared. Yes, ma'am?
So is it the same, like if you square root all equations, the same as the distance one?
No.
So what's the difference?
Because my x and my y is always x and y. These are not numbers.
So it can be like 6 to the 2?
What's that?
I mean like can you plot the number there?
for x, y, and y one you can, but not x and y.
So X and Y always be X and Y.
Yes. All right, your homework real quick is going to be a little bit different. Let me tell you what it is real quick. We are going to do numbers 5 through 27 odd, 5 through 27 odd, and numbers 41 through 47 odd. So 5 through 27 odd, and then 41 through 47 odd. Okay? I need to print those out. I'm going to do it at lunchtime, and if you come